Tell our listeners as briefly as you can about what these books are. They're adventure books. They're purely fiction, but they do have a connection to your life, I think.
Definitely the first two do. The start off, the book of The Informationist, introduces our character, our fearless heroine, Vanessa Michael Monroe, who is a missionary's child born in Central Africa and doesn't even really know the United States, doesn't get to the United States until she's almost 18 years old. And her life in Africa is what basically creates who she is. She's a hunter of information. She's also something of a chameleon and a predator due to events that happen to her before she flees Africa. And the Informationist was partially, I guess you could say, attached to my life because I lived in Africa, and my whole reason for wanting to write it in the first place was to be able to write about Africa. And part of my life that many listeners do know about and many don't is that I was born and raised in a religious cult, an apocalyptic cult that did not believe in education beyond 6th grade and was very isolated from the world. We did get out and mingle sometimes as a way to raise money or to get the things that we needed, but we weren't allowed to just freely socialize. We didn't go to public school. I did very sporadically, which is where my 6th grade education came from. But it was very insular, and we believed that the world was going to end at any given time, and clearly it didn't. And I was able to get out when I was in my 20s, and I already had 2 children, and that's sort of that was the background that led me into writing. It's complicated, but that's what got me into writing. And
but it lends it. I mean, I've read your first book. I haven't read the second book yet, but it does lend a lot of authenticity to the adventures of Michael, your character.
I believe it does, and especially in the case of the second book, The Innocent, the one that's coming out on the 28th. People ask me so often, well, what was it like being raised in a cult? Can you just tell me a little bit? And frankly, no, I can't just tell you a little bit because there's no little bit to it. I mean, how do you put 25 years into a little capsule and say, here's a little soundbite for you? So The Innocent was basically my answer to that question of what was it like being raised in a cult. And The Innocent is very much based on truth. People like to say that, people who don't know me and who read The Informationist and know a little bit about my background, they assume that The Informationist is partly autobiographical. And it's not. It's not at all. The only part of that story, which is somewhat biographical, is that it takes place in Africa. So I'm writing about a location where I actually really have been there. I know what it's like. I'm familiar with the cultures and so on and so forth. And they assume that was me, and it wasn't at all. But The Innocent, on the other hand, even though it's not my story per se, it is the story of what it was like growing up in the cult. And I everything in that book pretty much is true. It's all thrillerized and fictionalized but it's true. It's based on truth. I've taken things that really happened in real life, changed them slightly in order to make them work with the story. But it's true. And so it doesn't have the same, I guess you could say, edge of the knife, slit your throat sort of feeling to it as The Informationist does. But it is a lot more psychological, and it goes into, I take you into the cult and say, you want to know what it was like? Here you go. Have at it.
Wow. This show's been on the air for 24 years. We're about to enter our 25th year. We are just starting this service on YouTube and our new website. But if you'd like to hear this complete interview, go to our website. It's artmattersradio.com. That's artmattersradio.com. And hope you enjoy it. There's a lot on the arts, and we will be adding more as time goes along. We've been doing about more than 2,600 interviews with people in the arts over the last quarter century. We'll be adding to it, and just hope you can join us and have a good time. artmattersradio.com.